Good afternoon, Earth. This is Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion, Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting Butterfly. Alright, I'm just going to start rendering stones, and I'm going to use a bright orange to begin, and then we'll work our way up into lighter colors as we develop the highlights and shadows with more definition.
They extend beyond our brains in time as well as in space, through memory and through connections with the future. And they extend far beyond our brains through mystical experiences and connections with higher forms of consciousness. Now, the conventional view of minds is very different from all that. The conventional view put forward by the materialist belief system, which still dominates our universities and educational institutions, is that the mind is nothing but the brain. Minds are what brains do. Minds are nothing but brain activity. And all our mental life is encased inside our heads. We're insulated from everybody else in the privacy of our skulls. Now that is the standard view, and it's dominated the sciences since the late 19th century. It's the basis of contemporary medical thinking, biological thinking. The brain is just a computer inside the head. The trouble with this is that it doesn't, first of all, explain consciousness itself. If we live in a materialist universe which is made out of inanimate, unconscious matter, and everything is made of inanimate, unconscious stuff, then how come we're conscious at all? We ought not to be. So some materialist philosophers of mind try to pretend that we're not, and try to explain away consciousness as a kind of illusion. The trouble is, that doesn't really explain it away, because illusion is itself a mode of consciousness. And in fact, the very existence of consciousness is called the hard problem in the philosophy of mind. Now, the first point I want to make is that if we think about something as simple as vision, we arrive at the idea of the extended mind, the mind beyond the brain. If you think of what's happening when you see me standing here now, the standard view says that light reflected from me goes through the electromagnetic field, inverted images on your retinas, changes in the cone cells, impulses up the optic nerve, changes in different regions of the brain, and all that certainly happens. But then, that's supposed to explain vision. Well, first of all, it doesn't explain the fact you're conscious of what you're seeing. That's an aspect of the hard problem. But secondly, it doesn't explain your actual subjective sensation. You're experiencing a three-dimensional world in full colour. All of that is supposed to be inside your head. Yet, nobody's ever seen a full-colour 3D virtual reality display inside someone's head. So that is profoundly mysterious. Where is your experience? It's meant to be inside your head. Well, the hypothesis I'm suggesting is so simple it's hard to understand, and that is that your image of me is in your mind but not in your brain. In fact, it's right here. It's outside your head. Everything you see involves, I'm suggesting, a projection of mental images, of perceptual images, to where they seem to be. Sometimes they're projected to where something is not, like in an illusion or a hallucination. But generally speaking, they're projected to where things are, which is why we get around in the world without bumping into things. Normally this works very well. So in other words, I'm suggesting that the mind is extended in every aspect of visual perception, and that our minds stretch out. If you look at a star, your mind projects out those images to the very star itself over literally astronomical distances. So our minds are extended in every act of perception. Right now they're filling this room. Now, that is something that I think happens with animals as well. It's not special to people. This is the way vision works. It's a two-way theory of vision. The light comes in and the visual images are projected out. It's not an original theory of mind. In fact, it's a theory believed in by people all over the world. It was developed in ancient Greece in some detail. Euclid, the great geometer, explained for the first time clearly how mirrors work by pointing out that when you look at something in a mirror, your mind projects out these images. They go straight through the mirror because they're virtual projections, they're aspects of the mind. They're not blocked by glass or mercury. And that's why every time you look in the mirror, what you're seeing is the projections of your mind. So this theory is actually explained. It's a common everyday experience that's projected out. Even in modern physics textbooks, it says that the virtual images are behind the mirror and they're projected. There's little dotted lines in the physics textbook showing this projection, but it doesn't really think through those implications. Now, this is not just a philosophical theory, it's a testable hypothesis. And it means that if your mind reaches out to touch, when you see things, your mind's reaching out to touch what you look at. So you should be able to affect things by looking at them. And the easiest tests of this in the realm of looking at other people. If you look at someone from behind and they don't know you're there, and they can't see you or smell you or touch you, you might be hidden, you might be looking through a car window, for example, or a window of a building. If this theory is correct, they should be able to feel you looking at them, or at least sometimes would become aware of it. So the first question is, does the sense of being stared at actually exist? And as soon as you ask that question, you realise this is a very common everyday phenomenon. 95% of the population, according to surveys, have actually experienced feeling being looked at. And there's also the phenomenon where you can look at somebody from behind and they turn around. Most people have had that experience too. So I'm guessing most of you will have done. But there's a complete taboo on this subject within the academic world, even though everyone knows it. The children know about this phenomenon, and it's known all over the world. In the academic world, it's not a discussion. You can't discuss this because it's just dismissed as a superstition or make-believe. However, it's testable. And I've done a lot of research on this, first by interviewing people whose job it is to watch others, security guards, surveillance personnel, the drug squad at Heathrow, the store detectives at Harrods, and so on. And all of them say, yes, of course. They just take it for granted. This is such a well-known phenomenon to practical people. In martial arts, you can train to become more sensitive. There's now been hundreds of thousands of trials, experimental tests since the 1980s, which show this is indeed a real measurable phenomenon. It even works through closed-circuit television, and people can tell when they're being watched through CCTV. I summarise all this evidence in a lot of published papers. There was a whole special issue of the Journal of Consciousness Studies on this, and it's all brought together in my book, The Sense of Being Stared At, and other aspects of the extended mind. So I'm not going to go into the scientific evidence, but all the peer-reviewed papers are on my website if you want to see the details of these experiments. So, firstly, our minds are extended in every act of perception. And so are the minds of other animals. The world is full of visual projections, just as it's full of the transmissions of cell phones and radio and TV waves. This room is full of them. You can't see them, but they're there. And in the same way, it's full of the visual projections of everyone here. The second way in which minds are extended is through our connections with other members of social groups. In flocks of birds, like murmurations of starlings, an entire flock can turn almost simultaneously without the birds bumping into each other. Now, there's been a lot of attempts to understand this scientifically. Not only do they need to know where the other birds are, but they need to know where they're going to go. And this is a simple everyday observation. These flocks of birds turn, and I've never seen them bump into each other, and I've never seen any record of them doing that. They just know where the others are going. How do they do it? In the 1980s, people tried to produce computer models, supposing that they just looked at their nearest neighbours and adjusted their flight according to some kind of algorithm. That doesn't work. It turns out those models simply don't account for this, the speed at which this can happen. It works too fast for them just to watch, calculate things, then adjust their muscular movements. It happens much too fast for that. The best models today, computer models, are in terms of fields. The whole thing is a bit like a magnetic field. You move a magnet and all the iron filings change their positions. It's as if the whole flock has a field that links together the members of it and adjusts their behavior. They tune into the whole flock, as it were, the mind of the whole group. Now, the same is true of the schools of fish and herds of animals. And these social fields, which link together members of groups, continue to link together members of social groups even when they move apart. For example, in packs of wolves, the adult wolves leave the cubs in the den with a babysitter and go out hunting, ranging over tens or even hundreds of miles. And yet, naturalists have shown that they seem to remain in touch at a great distance, which can only be by telepathy. It's beyond the range of scent or sound. And I think that these abilities, these connections between members of a group are indeed the basis of what we call telepathy. Telepathy literally means distant feeling, tele, distant, pathy, feeling. And I think this is a normal, not paranormal, natural, not supernatural aspect of the way social animals coordinate their movements and behaviors, even at a distance. Again, I'm suggesting this is not some special human ability, it's a common animal ability. When I started investigating this, I thought, well, it's best to start with animals. They're less controversial than human psychic abilities, and I'm generally speaking better at it than people. So I started with domestic animals, dogs, cats, parrots, and horses. Collected stories. I now have a database of more than 5,000 case histories of stories that show people's animals can pick up their intentions. When they're in the same room, which commonly happens, they commonly pick up people's intentions. It could be subtle cues, body language, and so forth. But when people are miles away, you can't explain it in those terms, which is why I focused my research on dogs and cats that know when their owners are coming home. This work is summarised in my book, Dogs That Know When Their Owners Are Coming Home. The papers, again, all these papers are on peer-reviewed in journals. They're all on my website if you want to read the details. In these experiments, basically, we had people go at least 5 miles away. We filmed the place the dog waited. We had them come home at random times. They didn't know in advance, so it wasn't routine. We had them come in unfamiliar vehicles, usually taxis, different taxi each time, so there was no familiar car sounds. And the people at home didn't know when they were coming. But sometimes the weather.
Well, that only took 13 minutes. I'll be damned. Bob Ross would be fucking proud. Rock on. Oh, well, I might bust out some yellow and do the foreground highlights again with a more intense light.
And this is a repeatable phenomenon.
I ponder that for a minute. I might just cut it here.
Experiments with dogs and people, because most psychic research tests are rather boring, the human ones. And people's scores
it's a pretty good layer.
get bored. Dogs never get
And I do intend on building this one gradually, and it may take some time. So I think I'm just going to cut this here. That's it for the moment. Thanks for watching. It's Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion, Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting butterfly. All right, have a good day, yours.